Love is very fluctual. However, we believe that having a narrative that says that love is sacrificial will lead to individuals not being able to achieve the true meaning of love and enjoy it. So proud to propose. So moving on to our goal. Our goal is to help individuals love to the best of their abilities. This is our side. Moving on to some framing, right? First of all, the burden of proof. Government side. On our side, we will prove why this narrative is extremely harmful, as well as how our side and our narrative will be a better impact in society. Opposition side needs to prove why individuals being squished inside the narrative is justified, as well as why other alternatives don't work. Moving on to some characterizations of the narratives in status quo, right? In status quo, societies through media and other cultural practices pressure individuals to sacrifice for needs of others as opposed to prioritizing their own self-interest. For example, pursuing a career you don't like because your parents told you to do so, hiding your identity as a queer individual because it goes against the value of your family. Large institutions such as the media and the government test to portray individuals who prioritize themselves and their self as evil or as the antagonist, right? But also moving on to our counterfactual, you will have a narrative that you can love without making sacrifices. You would actually enjoy spending time with your partner instead of finding yourself having to make painful sacrifices. You can generally have a more enjoyable relationship than a pressuring relationship. You'll also have to make some adjustments based on your partner. However, you'll be able to express your feelings and your point of view. Moving on to our metrics, the matrix of today's debate is which side can help form a healthy relationship, right? But moving on, first argument about hard for the formation of love on their side. We believe that when love is sacrificial and there's a narrative, individuals would be challenged to forming love itself. Why is this the case? We believe that this is the case because individuals are not able to be comfortable when they're trying to opt into a relationship, since they have the burden to sacrifice for the individual no matter what happens, right? These individuals are not just being sacrificial to the extent where they are giving like popcorn when watching a movie, because we have stated before, these are bigger impacts and larger impacts that will bring influences to the person and what they commit to. These are things like giving up your job for your partner, believing that even though they like their job and you like your job and it was your dream, you'll be like a good partner if you sacrifice for them, right? Since these are the narratives that are formed on the opposing side, we believe that individuals will be scared to try out a new relationship in the first place because they do not have any courage to trying out a relationship and take the burden of sacrificing. We believe that this is an extremely harmful scenario and a narrative that is implemented within the individual's mind on their side. Moving on to our second argument about the prevention of abusive relationships. So the characterization of abusive relationships. This looks like people require sacrificing from other individuals, even as if it is obvious due to this narrative. Victims thinking that the normal way love works, even though it is not true and abuse is happening for them. Why is this likely to happen in the first place? We believe that individuals who are experiencing violence or domestic violence, for example, will keep on giving for the individual who is committing to that and being that believing that this is the only way for their partners to stay, right? Meaning to say, no matter how hard individuals are sacrificing, they do not get any credit and any benefits. However, since they are scared that their partners will leave them if they stop sacrificing and giving, because they still love their partner and believe that someday things might change and they might have a more structured relationship. Therefore, they will do this over and over again, regardless of their own personal rights, right? On our side, we believe that on our side, individuals will be able to maintain their healthy relationship, because instead of individuals taking all the hardship into themselves and just swallowing it, we believe that individuals will be able to show that they're uncomfortable and they want some parts fixed, right? We believe that on our side, we believe that individuals will be able to know what true love is, because they can express their ideologies and individual autonomy and their voice, however, live a harmonious life with their partner and their family, and to some extent, they will sacrifice, but these are things that are minor and just adjustments, right? We believe that this is the case that will happen on our side. On opposition side, we believe that individuals will be caught in this echo chamber where they still love their partner and don't want them to leave. However, they are sick and tired of always sacrificing, right? We believe that this is an extremely harmful narrative that should be so proud to propose.
Parents have a lot of responsibilities, such as making a good household environment, set a good example for us, and etc. We see that this tremendous amount of responsibility can only be sustained and maintained with sacrifice, directly leading to a stance and a rebuttal. We of course do not believe that sacrificing their whole life or something extreme is actually good. We're on the other hand saying that sacrificing the fundamental and basic things, such as time, is actually needed, such as opportunity cost. Moreover, we see that true sacrifice that we're talking about is actually only made when it is actually both-sided and benefited both sides. Also, let's talk about the rebuttal here. They talk about how like sacrificing job and etc., right? This is not true. In the status quo, we defend We defend more couples are both working without children because they are aware of the sacrifices they need to make when they get a kid. This is what LO says as an impact. Domestic abuse is an example of relationship that do not make sacrifice. Men are not making sacrifice and unfairly advantaged in that form of love. So let's talk about the first constructive on how this is necessary, right? What's the premise? We see that this idea of sacrifice encourages people to think about what their self-interest is and what they can actually do in order to make the relationship actually work. That's why it is actually so important. Also, there's a demonstration of commitment so that I am willing to sacrifice my time and comfort for you, shows true dedication, love, and strengthen the bond that they have. But note here, judge, that sacrifice needs to work both ways, both the wife and the husband. One side violently slaving away from the other for the other is not true sacrifice and not what we're promoting, right? It's completely wrong for the government to frame us as the side that promotes something close to enslavement and dominance within a relationship. We see that sacrifice is essential and needed in order for relationship to actually last and remain. We need conversation between the two. We need discussions. This is important since it nurtures the ability to think from others' perspective. Without sacrifice, it leads to lack of trust between the two people, not able to build trust and unity between the two. For example, would you rather trust someone that sacrificed nothing at you or someone else that measure that shows sacrifice to you, at least a little, right? What does sacrifice do as an impact? This will lead to less conflict within families and romantic relationship, more trust towards each other, and better relationships. Second constructive on how we are able to inform people of the responsibility of relationship. What do we mean by informing? Assertion basically is that we're able to tell them what you need, what you should do in order for a true living relationship to be made. Let's talk about the mechanism here. Before getting into a serious relationship or building a family, a lot of people do not truly know or understand what their relationship looks like. After all, it is both of their first times living a life because currently people view making sacrifices unnecessary, excessive, and toxic like the other side does. A lot of people get into disagreements and questions the authenticity of their commitment. If both parties are aware that they should sacrifice their time and resources as it is a sign of commitment, neither parties will use it as a sign that the other is not doing enough. Let's talk about the implication of this argument. By informing these people what is needed in a relationship, first of all, we're able to make couples be more careful before having a child. They're able to help them make better and more rational choices about it, right? Also, as an example, before getting married, we're able to make people actually think about what you're opting into so you don't divorce in the future. So let's talk about the even if comparative. This basically rebuts to government bench's case if they simply say that people will not marry because of the fear, because they're so afraid that they're going to of the sacrifice they made. We think this is actually completely fine. Why? They should be aware of what responsibility you need for having a child. Our parents have to take us to academies, pay for our school. We have to eat things and as I stated, maintain a household, etc. This responsibility is not small, but it's actually tremendous and big. We see that it is necessary for actually informing these and sacrifice to actually exist in order for these to actually happen. If these people are not prepared for sacrificing and doing all these things, we see that it's actually fine for these people to not to actually marry or etc. Right? So why do we take today's debate home? Firstly, we successfully proved to you that the necessity of sacrifice itself, right? Also, we challenged their definition. It wasn't even a definition. Their mischaracterization saying that sacrifice is one-sided and is slaving. We see that it should be both-sided, and that is what we're debating under the premise, right? Because of all the reasons, we take today's debate home. Opposition bench wins. Thank you.
Even if we agree to everything the opposition said, we still win by a large point margin. So moving on to some clarifications. So there's a mechanism that we stand on for this debate as to why these people would contribute to the sacrifice themselves for loved ones. So they have this burden and incorrect definition that love means more and more sacrifice. And because of this, we can tell you that people will continue to feel the need of sacrificing. So just because these citizens have this continuous burden and this continuous belief, it is inevitable that these people will continue to sacrifice for their loved ones. So moving on to some rebuttals. So note that the characterizations that the op made was unfair. So there was nothing in the motion or such that says that the sacrifices made are made in a situation where two people mutually feel love. So we believe that the reason as to why couples are having less and less children is because of the too much burden of sacrifice and such. So we believe that individuals are loving one way, and this will gradually lead to abuse in the long term as a whole, like what our first speaker completely mechanized and extensively explained. So there are also they're also framing the debate unfairly to households. However, even if they still frame it like this, even if this still exists, the children will still have a burden to repay all their sacrifices to parents. And if unfortunately and unbiologically they get a bad job or go to a bad university, they would still feel this burden that they didn't commit to their love for parents, and this will cause them a lot of stress to do better, and then that they will feel like they're not enough for the society. So they're characterizing us as people as not being able to be responsible for their partners. So moving on to our last and final argument, which is an extension about the abuse of arguments, talking about the conflicts in relationships. So what does the opposition side look like regarding relationships? So looking at how we said that sacrificial love abuses relationships, the opposition side would be a world full of people feeling the powerful and impactful burden that love brings into this debate. So this means a world where people are stripping their good values and such for each other. In most cases, we identified for only one person. So this is a result of how this policy of sacrificing things for love could lead to abuse of this, and therefore one person having to give all they have for just one person will take everything granted. So it is unjust for the government to say that two people will mutually feel love, and this is ensured in every scenario, because unlike us, they had no explanation and no mechanism as to why this is true. So now mechanism as to why this will lead to conflicts in relationships. So how will this work? So there is nothing said in the motion of any in the debate or anything that if there are two citizens, they have to love each other mutually. There's nothing about having toxic people in this world and criminals to some a very large extent. So we believe that this abuse is impossible to prevent, as even though people have their own moral standards and whatever, it is possible for these moral standards to be completely wrecked and ignored when these abusive people have such a great opportunity to make someone love them and then abuse the system by demanding everything they have. So people could make someone love them and then say that if they do not commit to whatever the abuser wants to do, the abuser / love of the victim would leave them, and therefore leave them heartbroken and upset because of their huge love for this person. And it's not like it's even hard to make somebody love you. It is like very easy to make someone love you because for the reasons I will explain. So this will lead to continuous conflicts between lovers. So this may be gradual, as the love is everlasting for some extent, and could also continue to feel great passion and happiness for sacrificing for one another. However, there's a clear extent on which an individual believes that they're throwing themselves away from such big sacrifices and getting no source and help from and compensation in return. So this will lead to a string of both the victim and the abuser, which completely is the opposite of this will lead to a string of both the victim and the abuser having terrible conflicts, which is completely the opposite of love. So this clearly shows that in the opposition world, you have continuous fights, breakups, and such that will eventually lead to a chaotic, cold society that originated from those trying to sacrifice things for those you love. So why is it justified to stop sacrificing for love instead of targeting those who are toxic? So this is not solving the root cause of the problem. So stopping the people who are toxic from being so will only cut off the tip of a rapidly forming iceberg, because it is so easy for more people to just completely abuse the system, as there are no other ways as there are no restrictions that these people have. They can just think, okay, so I'm going to abuse the system and I'm going to try to make someone love me and then steal other stuff. This is also simply impossible. So more and more people will abuse the system because the government proves no way to stop this and makes no engagement. So some comparative. So in our side looks like a world where people are able to maintain their relationship without any of these toxic narratives. Does this mean less conflict? Because no one is making one another to give something to them. The opposition side looks like the partner demanding sacrifices all the time, gradually leading to abuse and a lot of conflicts. Therefore, so proud to propose. Thank you.
Judge, before we move on to rebuttals, I want to emphasize our team's stance, right? Sacrifice needs to work both ways. This is our stance. One-sided dominant relationship where what is dominating is not true sacrifice and not what we are promoting. We want to clarify this. We want the world in which males also sacrifice many aspects of their life and come forward in order for the relationship to work, not just the females. Okay, moving directly onto the rebuttals. Firstly, if a person is not even willing to do something that will help their partner, then what is the difference between their partner and a random stranger? If there is no special action toward their partner, then it is not true love. In order to show that you care for your partner, you need to prove that you need to value them more than other people. If that sacrifice that you make for your partner is painful, according to the Prime Minister, then it is not true love. When you love another person, you should be willing to actually help that person, and you should be able to sacrifice some of your own comfort if it makes your partner uncomfortable, right? And also their counterfactual is very flimsy and not clear. We don't think that we think that love isn't an emotion motion that is worth nothing and has no responsibilities nor consequences. But I actually think that the motion gives various examples of romantic or family love, which comes with obligations such as shared childcare, not just the female or the mother having to stay home and give up their careers to take care of the child, or sharing the breadwinner's wages, right? Not just the breadwinner saying, "Oh, I earned it, so I deserve it," and you don't have any say in how you use it, right? They also say that people will need to sacrifice jobs. However, the truth is, as time passes, more couples are actually choosing to not have children and actually preserve both of their jobs and careers, right? This is because both the husband and the sacrifice recognize the sacrifices that they will need to make when they have a child, such as high financial costs, and probably one of them are going to have to be hampered in terms of their job and careers due to having to constantly watch the child every minute, right? We don't think that in the status quo it's possible for both of them to actually work as well as take care of the child, which is why a lot of couples nowadays choose to actually opt out of having a child and instead preserve both of their jobs and careers and push for what they want. They also raise a point about domestic abuse and sexism. However, there's no mechanism from government on how oppressed women can talk back to their husband, right? Even if this is true, people not in relationships are then aware that these relationships with unfair sacrifices exist and can choose to not opt into these toxic relationships from the start, right? Also, government doesn't prove how housewives or low-income wives, so essentially the minorities within relationships, can talk back to their oppressive husbands, right? So we think that actually those husbands who think that they deserve everything and because they're the breadwinner, so in the counterfactual, we think that the government doesn't have a mechanism onto how housewives or low-income wives would actually be able to fight with those husbands in these cases. To also rebut to the Deputy Prime Minister, the government assumes that the narrative is not strong enough to only affect the weak wife and not the powerful husband, making the sacrifice one-sided. Then there's no point of this debate, Judge, right? Since the wife can also challenge this norm. To do a comparison, we think that proposition only makes people currently in toxic relationships to feel better and hope that they talk back to their husbands or wives, versus opposition prevents potential victims from walking into romantic relationships or overburdensome relationships by warning them of the responsibilities in the first place, right? We think that our case is a much better case. Okay, now moving on to our team's final constructive on how it prevents abuse and exploitation of the spouse. So because spouses communicate with each other and understand that both the husband and the wife need to give up some of each other's comforts and energy to maintain a healthy relationship on our side, husbands don't force wives to do everything, but will also do chores. Note here, Judge, I once again emphasize that traditional housewife working husband is not true sacrifice, but a selfish imposition of patriarchy. Sacrifice needs to work both ways. Both the male and female needs to be willing to sacrifice some of their comfort, such as time or energy, for each other. True sacrifice means things like men doing these chores as well, or taking care of children while working. We want to preserve these healthy dynamics. Also, the definition of sacrifice is very fluid and changes often based on the social atmosphere. This can empower minorities within relationships to discuss roles and jobs of their spouses and reduce household conflict and violence. Therefore, it's a clear opposition one. Thank you.
Judge, the opposition's world looks like a place where people abuse the narrative about sacrificial love to the extent where victims of domestic violence does not even know they have a toxic relationship between them and their partner. So proud to propose. One clarification before the rebuttals about how our team has given a counter policy about the way to express love, which was in about how they could express their feeling of love in talking or etc. instead of sacrifice. A few rebuttals before the clashes. Know that they had no engagement to our rebuttals and arguments, and therefore they lose the round. They also tend to limit this debate on families, which is unfair. People will be actually scared on their side, and while they cannot even talk back because there is that strongly implemented narrative, individuals will feel the pressure to sacrifice. They keep on talking about how this narrative will be able to let people know about their responsibility in love, and they have talked about how they believe this is a benefit and so on. However, they limit this whole debate into the scenario where people do not have babies because they know their responsibility and does not engage at all about our case. It was toxic relationship between partners or families. And their only response was that this is not what they intend. However, the only thing that this is not what they intend does not mean that this would not happen. Before moving on to the clashes, I would like to take any POIs. 3, 2, 1. no engagement. To move on to the one major question I have found in this debate, which side is able to reduce toxic relationships between people and promotes actual love? First, I would like to talk about what does toxic relationship actually look like. This looks like A, individuals being forced by their partner to sacrifice for them just for the reason that you love them, and B, this narrative even leading to crime like domestic violence. Why is this like that? Why is this likely to be the case? This is likely to happen because A, people would think that it is their responsibility to sacrifice things for your husband or wife, child, etc. And B, they will be afraid that their partners will leave if they do not sacrifice for them. And some more characterization and mechanism on this. The response that love will happen both ways from husband to wife and wife to husband is not likely to happen in every single case, although we're not saying that's impossible. This is because it is completely likely that people will be able to abuse this narrative if they want to. This is because, first of all, it is very highly accessible, and if a person wanted to get something from their partner, they would just have this narrative as the reason, and therefore they would be able to abuse this narrative and shape this narrative whatever they want to. It is not true that everyone would understand the narrative as the way opposition side wants them to. They can always persuade their partner that sacrifice is needed if they do not want the other partner to leave. This looks like a husband forcing a wife to have this certain career, although the wife does not want to have this career, saying that you need to sacrifice because you love me, and if you don't sacrifice, I'm going to leave. This looks like victim not even knowing if you're getting abused in the first place because of the highly accessible narrative that is everywhere, such as social media, and their rebuttal that this is not what they intend does not mean that this would happen. And our side wants response for this in the reply speech, which would not get a lot of credit anyways. For these reasons, very proud to propose.
Moving straight on to our first clash, who better makes happier and stable relationships? We proved that knowing about sacrifice and also knowing that they have to make sacrifices before relationships will make better and stable families and connections. Even if the other side says that this idea might lead to families getting divorced or something, we have a response to that, right? There are many reasons that divorces take place, but most of the time it is about lack of trust and or communication and connection. The reason divorces happen so much is because before getting into a proper relationship, people are not aware of what they're getting into. The people on their side, without the narrative about sacrifices, do not know that sacrifices are needed for trusting one another. They do not know that sacrifices are needed for communication, nor are they aware that sacrifices are needed for connections. Now, on our side, we solve this issue, right? Sacrifices can promote cooperation and collaboration within a family or relationship. Sacrifices within a family context often involve compromising personal preferences or making adjustments for the greater good of the family unit. Now, this promotes a spirit of understanding and cooperation among family members, fostering a sense of unity. Again, this only works with sacrifices from all sides, and the idea of sacrifices being a sign of love is not being pushed on the other side enough, which is why the other side has an incorrect characterization. The other side talked about abusive relationships, right? But this is really the other way around. To respond to this, we talked about both sides making sacrifices. The reason only one person is making a sacrifice is because the idea of sacrifice is only pushed enough to one side of the party, which is what happens if you follow the other side's case. Now, if we follow our case and true sacrifice is made, manipulative relationships are not a thing. Although in the characterization that the other side gives, only one party sacrifices a lot, the other party who is abusive is not making sacrifices. So that is the problem. That is the red flag. So in that situation, who is the toxic one? The one who sacrifices something or someone who refuses to sacrifice anything, which is characterized as the abusive one even on their other side. We say that there are two levels of sacrifices, right? Not making any sacrifices or being fully committed. We aspire to achieve the point in which everyone is fully committed, not just in between. Now, moving on to our second clash, which side has better prevention of these toxic relationships, right? They said people will think sacrifices is their responsibility. Well, to respond to that, good, because if they do not think it is their responsibility, that's not normal, nor is it okay. Now, proposition only makes people currently failing toxic relationships to feel better and hope that they talk back to their family, spouse, or whatever. This is something the other side, government, cannot do, but we prevent potential victims of domestic violence directly from walking into relationships by first of all warning them of relationships or letting them at least acknowledge what their relationship should and can look like in the early stages. Now, said government does not mechanize how low-income wives or husbands can talk back to their other spouse in the counterfactual when there isn't even an idea of a sacrifice. They have absolutely no mechanism or reasoning. Now, the problem in the other side's problematic world is that the people themselves are toxic. Making sacrifice as an act itself is completely normal and absolutely healthy. On the other side, they characterize the people who make sacrifices as abused 24/7, when in fact the problem is the people or person who is abusing them and refuse to make sacrifices themselves to in a way repay the other partner for the things they have did. Now, we see nothing wrong with the act of sacrificing itself. You have to sacrifice time and you have to make adjustments. If we give a comparison of outcomes, here's how it works. On our side exclusively, there's no need to have to break up. That is because, at least on our side, we prevent people, whether they could potentially turn out to be the abuser or the abused one, from walking into an unhealthy relationship from the get-go, since they can see what they will need. Now, however, the other side does not do anything. They just say that relationships are toxic yet pose absolutely no solution. What are we supposed to do about that? We ask the other side judge, what do they solve and how would they solve it? However, it is too late to respond on the other hand now. So, however, even if the government does anything that we do in the counterfactual, women will still have to go into these toxic relationships. That is unnecessary struggle and pain. We would rather have a preemptive strategy on how to deal with relationships rather than have a reactionary measure and hope that oppressed women or men fight back. Thank you.
I want to firstly clarify the term sacrifice, since that was what government was talking about for the whole 12 minutes of their speech. We don't get why side propositions keep on arguing their own mischaracterized stance where sacrifice means slaving one another in a one-sided way. Even if I search the word sacrifice in the dictionary, the definition won't be this, right? Hannah, we already told you from the get-go that the word sacrifice we're debating in today's motion is basically when the two are able to show it's your basic things like making time for them and etc. We also say that true sacrifice is only made when it is both-sided and benefits both of the people. The examples they keep saying is a result of no preparation of sacrifice. We say that their example should be neglected in today's debate. Let's talk about the first issue of which side is able to maintain a better household at the end of the day. Government second speaker simply says that our world leads to a chaotic aftermath and like massive breakups and other things. But look, as already elaborated, breakups are only made when they're not prepared for making a relationship and having responsibility. They simply misunderstood the situation. Also, they keep talking about the domestic violence that we rebutted from the get-go of today's debate. Our deputy speaker told you that this lack mechanism, they didn't show any example, they didn't show any mechanism, and they should even lack the clear impact, right? And even if reply speaker says that, it's too late, right? So we prove to you two main things. First of all, by informing these people and making sure that they're going to be ready for marrying, etc., we're able to create better and more stable relationship that won't lead to breakups. Also, secondly, we gave you an even if comparative and what was mentioned. So, as Elo and Whip emphasized, if government simply argues that people would be afraid because of sacrifice, sure, we think that people are not ready to make basic sacrifice, should not marry in the first place, since it will lead to the world that governments keep saying, like breakups, divorce, and etc. Right? So let's talk about the second issue of which side is able to create better outcome for the individuals, the most vulnerable individuals that we are debating in today. Even if we play their game channel and assume their best case, sure, they empower a oppressed housewife to talk back, which is simply unnecessary pain to begin with. Rather, even in their worst case, and say that all their arguments are actually true and all their rebuttals are actually true, we prevent people to not walk into toxic relationships by knowing their capabilities in making sacrifices or finding red flags in potential partners. This point still stands. Why? Because they show absolute no engagement, no rebuttals through this point. They don't even talk about this, right? So as conclusion, what do we say? We, at the end of the day, when in the magnitude of the problem, what do I mean by that? We're able to help more people in society, but proposition at the end of the day helps only the minority numbers of people currently in this relationship, right? So two things I'd like to emphasize before ending my speech. First of all, they lose in the first issue, which is like basically helping the vulnerable stakeholder and maintaining a better household in the first place. They didn't show any mechanism on how domestic violence will be made. And secondly, they never talked about on how they actually benefited, right? Secondly, we take today's debate, even in our worst case, as mentioned, in the comparative, thus government bench loses, opposition bench wins. Thank you.
Our side takes this debate home because we are able to show what real love is and true love is for individuals. While on the other hand, opposition side cannot provide a mutual exclusive reason as to why they can prove their burden of proof, as well as to help individuals live a life that they could love to live, right? So proud to oppose. Moving on to some clarifications, right? First of all, their side's whole case was on the assumption that individuals will always care for each other and therefore the sacrifice is justified, right? We believe that love is actually fluctual, like our PM has stated, meaning to say individuals will not be able to always love their partner. Sometimes individuals will not be able to love their partner to some extent. We believe that if this happens, they will try to manipulate their partner to make it so that the individual is clinging onto their partner because they still like their partner, right? But also they stated this whole entire argument and this rebuttal about abuse, right? There is nothing said that you have to sacrifice things even though you have no forms of love for them, right? This ensures the fact that if one person doesn't care about another and are just using them for forms of abuse and forms of manipulation, it is inevitable that one person could abuse this, right? But also, this has not been mentioned at all by the opposition side. However, we've been continuously stating this. Second of all, sacrifice was characterized in the beginning of this debate as something that is huge, as most of the time lead to terrible consequences when committed to the individual who committed to it, right? So this is the correct characterization compared to ops' consistent characterization, saying that sacrifices are not too big. This is because larger specifics sacrifices are the ones who the person sacrificing are most likely to commit to, as one feels great, empowering love for one another, regardless if they both do. It is hard to call someone undying love and something undying love if the only sacrifice given to one is small as giving bread to someone, right? This means that the characterization of sacrifice is the government side made is correct, right? We believe that things that are small are called affection, like where the PM has stated in our speech. But moving on to the clash we won, which side is able to reduce toxic relationships between individuals and promote actual love. We will explain what impact this has on the debate and how we win this debate. Moving on, characterization of toxic relationships. As our whip has stated, and as our speakers have continuously stated, individuals being forced by their partner to sacrifice something extreme just for them and just for the reason that you love them, right? So this narrative even leads to crimes like domestic violence, because even though you might want to state your opinion, because of the sacrifice narrative, you'll always be in that squished narrative, right? But also, why is this likely to happen? People think it is their duty to give up things for their husband or wife, child, etc. They'll be afraid that if their partners will leave them if they do not sacrifice for them. Their response is that love will be in both ways is not likely to happen, because it is completely possible that people would be able to abuse this narrative in the first place. As we have stated over and over continuously, if a person wanted to get something from their partner, they would have this narrative as the reason, right? It is not true that everyone would understand the narrative as the way the opposition side wants them to. As we have continuously stated, they can always persuade their partner that sacrifice is needed if they do not want the other to leave. This looks like victims not even knowing if you are getting abused because of the highly accessible narrative. So proud to propose